Two more police officers shot and wounded early this morning while serving a search warrant in Georgia. It's an incident which left the suspected attacker dead. There's been a recent alarming wave of shootings targeting police officers. It's a record numbers of cops fatally shot on the job this year alone. My next guest is saying, you know what, that's inspired him to introduce a new bill that would make any attack on law enforcement a hate crime in the state of California. He is Republican State Assemblyman. He's Jay Obernolte. He joins me now. Sir, thanks for joining us on the show. Can you tell us a little bit about the bill and the history of it, just quickly?
Well, certainly. Last July, I was very alarmed to hear about the 5 police officers in Dallas that were basically assassinated just as a result of their profession. There were 5 others that were seriously wounded, and then just 10 days later in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, 3 more police officers were gunned down. And that really inspired me to raise awareness of this issue by introducing Assembly Bill 2, which would add the status as a peace officer to the list of things that constitute a hate crime in California.
You know, Mr. Obernolte, the criticism has been that, you know, the groups of people that are protected under the hate crime laws, they're vulnerable. Cops can defend themselves. They have weapons. What do you say to that criticism?
Well, I don't think it makes much sense to me. If you look at the definition of a hate crime, it's a crime in which the victim is chosen not out of specific animosity towards them as an individual, but rather out of hostility towards the entire group that they represent. And if you look at these ambush-style police attacks in the last year, they fit the very definition of what a hate crime is and what we're supposed to be protecting against.
You know, a number of states, I think, are picking up on this, right?
Yes, you're right. There was a law passed in Louisiana just recently that adds status as a peace officer to what constitutes a hate crime. That's what we're trying to do in California.
So this is sort of like the Blue Lives Matters legislation, right? And you're in that kind of group, right?
Yeah, that's accurate.
So what has been the reaction in the state of California to your bill?
Oh, it's been almost universally positive. All the law enforcement agencies are certainly in favor of it, but I think anyone that recognizes the value of the rule of law in the United States is in favor of it, because if you think about it, an attack on a police officer is an attack on the rule of law, which is really an attack on the very basis of our society.
What's the extra penalty if your bill passes, it becomes a hate crime in the state of California to assault a police officer? What would or kill? What would the extra penalties be?
Well, if you're also charged under California's hate crime law, it would depend on what the underlying offense was. But in general, for a felony, it would add 1 to 3 years in state prison for the commission of that crime. And it's also important to note that this is not any assault on a peace officer that would be covered. These are only assaults that are targeted specifically against police officers because they are police officers. So, for example, the 2 peace officers in Georgia earlier today that were shot, you know, they certainly deplorable, certainly something that we would dislike, but not a hate crime when they're injured in the course of their duties.
Assemblyman Mr. Obernolte, thank you so much for having us, for being on the show and bringing us the story. Come back with the update.